Carl Jung discovered that you can recognize someone's true character by observing just two things: not their words, not their status, not even their actions when others are paying attention. Jung found that two very specific psychological signals reveal who someone truly is beneath their social mask. And most people unknowingly display these signs without realizing it. Imagine this moment. You're sitting across from someone you thought you understood, a co-worker, a friend, maybe even your partner. They appear authentic, reliable, well-composed, yet something inside you senses a gap. You can't identify exactly what it is, but your intuition whispers that there's more hidden beneath the surface. Jung devoted decades to studying what he named the persona, the mask every individual wears to conceal the deeper self. But he discovered that no matter how carefully a person designs their outer image, these two psychological indicators always break through. And once you recognize them, you will never again be deceived by a false persona. These are not complicated assessments. They are simple observations that uncover the profound truth about human character. By the conclusion of this journey, you'll not only be able to read others with clarity, but you will begin to perceive yourself in ways you never thought possible. What makes Jung's discovery so unsettling is that these two reveals don't merely expose other people's nature. They compel you to confront your own hidden self. Jung once said, "The most frightening thing is to accept oneself completely." And these two psychological openings will reflect back to you the very aspects of yourself you've been trying to avoid. Many people live believing they can evaluate character by watching outer behavior. They search for charm, generosity, competence, or confidence. But Jung realized these qualities all belong to what could be called the performance layer, the carefully built image we put before the world. The genuine person exists beneath that surface performance. And Jung discovered that no matter how advanced someone becomes in controlling their image, two distinct unconscious patterns always betray their authentic essence. These patterns operate beyond deliberate control, which is why they are trustworthy. Jung once observed, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. But judgments built on surface impressions are usually misleading. Real insight into character requires digging into the unconscious patterns that people cannot falsify or conceal." What Jung found was that character comes through not in what people choose to reveal, but in what slips out despite their best efforts. These two psychological signatures show up whenever someone's defenses drop, their mask loosens, or they experience some form of pressure. Jung's first revealing key is what I call shadow mapping, recognizing someone's real nature by noticing who they condemn most strongly. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you will call it destiny." This unconscious control becomes visible most clearly in the way we judge others. When a person criticizes someone else with striking intensity, they are not just offering an observation, they are projecting their own rejected qualities onto that individual. Jung discovered that what we despise most in others is usually what we've buried deepest in ourselves. He named this projection the unconscious act of recognizing our own unaccepted traits in another. The stronger the emotional charge, the closer we are to seeing their hidden shadow. Let me illustrate. Consider David, an accomplished architect who prides himself on honesty. At nearly every office meeting, David grumbles about his colleague Marcus, labeling him artificial and manipulative. His voice sharpens when he discusses Marcus's ease with clients. His jaw stiffens when Marcus receives acknowledgement. But here's what Jung would notice. David's strong response to Marcus isn't really about Marcus at all. It's about the qualities David himself has suppressed. Deep down, David wishes he could be more persuasive, more socially skilled, but he has buried this wish because he fears it would make him inauthentic. Jung said, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not free, it confines. David's harsh view of Marcus is a form of self-rejection. He is denying a side of himself that could actually help him thrive. This is why shadow mapping proves so consistent. When someone judges others with intensity, they are revealing inner conflicts. The traits they attack most often are the very ones they have hidden away in their unconscious. If you've ever caught yourself condemning someone only to realize it revealed something about you, you've experienced this projection firsthand. But projection isn't always aimed at negatives. Jung discovered we also project positive qualities we're reluctant to embrace. When someone constantly elevates others, describing them as brilliant or endlessly confident, they are often projecting abilities they themselves carry but have not accepted. The signal is in the level of emotional intensity. When someone's reaction to another person is outsized, whether disapproving or admiring, you're seeing their shadow at work. It shows not only the traits they have repressed, but also the ones they secretly long to claim. Jung's second character reveal is what can be called mask maintenance, watching how someone responds when their polished image comes under threat. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But most people invest enormous energy protecting the version of themselves they believe they should display. Maintaining that image requires constant vigilance." Jung observed that when a person's persona is tested, when their mask slips or someone questions their identity, their authentic self suddenly emerges in that fragile moment. Here's how to detect it. Notice what happens when someone receives unexpected criticism, when their ability is challenged, or when they are caught making an error. Do they become defensive? Do they lash back? Do they divert blame? Or do they pause, consider, and answer sincerely? Take Sarah as an example. Sarah is a marketing executive known for her composed professionalism. She has built her reputation on being the calm one, the colleague who never loses her temper under stress. Yet, during an important client meeting, the client openly doubted her team's approach, questioning her decisions. In that instant, Sarah's composed persona collapsed. Her tone grew sharp, her body rigid. She interrupted the client, shifted blame onto her team, and threw subtle criticisms at the client's past choices. The serene professional vanished, replaced by someone insecure, defensive, and quick to sacrifice her team for her image. Jung would explain that this single moment revealed Sarah's truer character far more than years of calm interaction. Under pressure, when her persona cracked, her deeper patterns surfaced. Jung once said, "The root of all psychological suffering is the refusal to endure legitimate pain." Sarah's resistance to feeling the discomfort of being criticized forced her into defensive patterns that unveiled her nature. The powerful insight here is that these breakdowns of the persona don't only happen during big crises. They occur in countless small moments throughout ordinary life. When someone's phone battery dies and they can't scroll through their feeds, when they're left waiting longer than expected, when a joke doesn't land, pay attention to subtle expressions, shifts in tone, and changes in body language. These tiny cracks in the mask tell you more about someone's inner self than hours of polite conversation. Jung realized that genuine character is not what someone carefully chooses to display when prepared. It is what surfaces when they are caught off guard, unshielded, or under stress. The most whole individuals, those Jung described as individuated, demonstrate a consistency between their outward persona and their authentic inner responses. Their public identity and private reactions match because they've embraced themselves fully. Now that you've seen Jung's two powerful character reveals, let's explore why they function so consistently from a psychological viewpoint. Jung devoted his life to examining what he called the structure of the psyche, how the mind arranges itself to navigate reality while sheltering the ego. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are altered." But before transformation can take place, one must grasp the true composition of each personality, the authentic being beneath the outer performance. The reason projection so accurately reveals character is because our unconscious cannot separate self from other when it comes to rejected traits. When David criticizes Marcus for being artificial, his unconscious is actually attempting to work through his own conflict with authenticity versus social grace. Jung found that the unconscious mind uses what might be described as projection mapping. It projects inner struggles onto external people, making them visible and easier to confront. The intensity of someone's judgment almost always corresponds to the intensity of their inner conflict with that same trait. This is why people who are truly confident rarely waste energy condemning others' insecurities. A person who has resolved their relationship with a quality does not feel the need to attack it in someone else. By paying attention to these projections and to how people maintain their masks under pressure, you gain access to a more reliable window into human character than any deliberate performance could ever provide. Someone who is genuinely successful doesn't feel threatened by the ambitions of others. Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate what truly matters to oneself." When a person consistently judges others, they are often exposing their own inner isolation, their disconnection from the parts of themselves they've rejected. The second reveal, persona breakdown, is effective because holding up a false image demands enormous psychological energy. Jung described this as ego maintenance, and he realized that this structure becomes delicate under stress. When someone's persona comes under attack, their basic defense mechanisms come online. These defenses show their deeper psychological tendencies. Do they lash out, showing hidden aggression? Do they retreat, pointing to avoidance? Do they distract or blame shift, revealing dishonesty patterns? Or do they integrate the experience, showing maturity? Jung said, "A man who has not walked through the inferno of his passions has never conquered them." The way someone manages criticism or challenge shows if they have integrated their difficult emotions or remain dominated by them. Notice how people react when tension rises. Comment if you've ever witnessed someone's real nature surface under pressure. Stress reveals truth because these patterns work beneath conscious awareness. A person can choose their words, practice their gestures, and carefully prepare their image when things are under control. But when their psychological defenses activate, their authentic patterns come into the open. Jung knew that understanding character isn't about catching people in lies or exposing weaknesses. It's about perceiving the whole being, their struggles, their defenses, their areas for growth, and their genuine strengths. This level of seeing allows for real connection rather than shallow interactions. Beyond Jung's two core reveals, there is a third pattern that arises when you consider them together. I call this the integration test, the observation of how someone responds when their own shadow material is reflected back at them. This is the ultimate test of character because it shows whether someone has the ability to grow or whether they remain trapped in unconscious cycles. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The integration test works like this. When you notice someone projecting their shadow onto others, reflect it back gently, not accusingly, but with curiosity. You might say, "I noticed you seem really upset by people who show off. Have you ever felt like showing off but held yourself back?" Watch their response. This moment discloses more about their character than months of surface-level interaction because it tests how they relate to their own unconscious material. Consider David again, the architect who judges Marcus for being fake. When asked if he ever wishes he had stronger social skills, David could respond in one of two ways. The first is the defensive reaction. "Are you saying I'm fake like Marcus?" That's ridiculous. I'm genuine. Unlike him, I don't need to manipulate people to succeed. This shows that David is still highly defended against his shadow. His character is rigid, and his potential for growth is blocked by his refusal to acknowledge his complexity. The second possible response is the integrative reaction. Actually, yeah, sometimes I do wish I was better with people. I respect Marcus's ability to connect, even if his approach bothers me. Maybe I'm jealous of something I secretly want. This shows David can hold paradox, being bothered by something while also admitting his personal relationship to it. Jung wrote, "The most intense conflicts once overcome leave behind a sense of calm and security that is hard to shake." People who integrate feedback about their shadow show this resilience. They grow stronger through awareness rather than weaker. The integration test uncovers 3 different character types Jung spoke about. The unconscious type remains completely unaware of their projections and becomes defensive when confronted. They lack reflection and are often shocked by how others respond to them. The aware but defended type understands their projections intellectually but can't emotionally work with them. They might say, "I know I judge people," but they don't ask what it reveals about themselves. The integrated type can observe their projections with openness, learn from them, and use them as signposts for growth. Jung called these people conscious, not perfect, but awake to their patterns. If you've learned to view your judgments as information about yourself, you might say, "My projections became my teachers." This capacity for integration predicts how someone will handle disagreements, self-improvement, feedback, and intimacy in their relationships. Those who cannot integrate their shadow material will keep repeating the same struggles, always blaming the outside world for what lives inside them. But those who can consciously engage with their projections become what Jung described as individuated, authentic, self-aware, and able to form genuine connections with others. Once you understand Jung's character assessment system, the next step is applying it in the real world. But before that, a vital caution. Jung wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where the will to power dominates, love is absent." These insights should be used to understand and connect, never to manipulate or control. Assessing character must serve compassion, not domination. Here's how shadow mapping applies in different contexts. In close relationships, listen to how your partner speaks about their exes, co-workers, or people they dislike. Are they continually irritated by selfish people? This may point to their own unresolved struggle with healthy self-advocacy. Do they criticize others for being too needy? Perhaps they are denying their own need for closeness. But this awareness should never be a weapon. Use it to create connection, not conflict. If you notice projection, you might say, "It sounds like that person's neediness really frustrates you. Do you ever feel like you can't show your own needs?" This opens the door to deeper intimacy. In the workplace, watch how colleagues react to criticism, setbacks, or challenges to their ideas. Do they grow defensive, shift blame, or retaliate? Or do they pause, reflect, and respond with thoughtfulness? This reveals their readiness for growth, teamwork, and leadership under pressure. Jung wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no formula for life that applies to all cases. Knowing someone's character structure helps you communicate in ways that fit their psychological shape. For parenting, these insights can be transformative. When your teenager says their friends are fake or attention-seeking, guide them to explore what this tells them about their own worries around authenticity or belonging. This nurtures self-awareness instead of judgment. But character assessment is always a two-way mirror. Jung reminded us, "Everyone you meet knows something you don't know but need to learn. Every judgment you form, Every strong reaction you have to another person's behavior reveals something about your own psyche. A practical exercise for the week is to keep a shadow journal. Each time someone irritates you, write down exactly what bothered you. Then ask, where does this quality exist in me? What am I afraid of in this trait? Do not condemn yourself for what you discover. Jung wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the foundation of the entire moral problem and the heart of a whole outlook on life." Accepting yourself is not indulgence. It is the groundwork for psychological well-being. Also, try practicing the integration test on yourself. When someone offers feedback that stings, resist the urge to react immediately. Instead, ask yourself, what if there's a grain of truth here? What might this teach me about myself? Jung recognized that development is not about perfection. It is about becoming conscious. The aim is not to erase your shadow, but to live with it in awareness, rather than letting it control you unconsciously. If you're ready to see your reactions as tools for growth, affirm, "I choose conscious self-discovery." Yet there's another layer we must face, the shadow side of character assessment itself. Jung wrote, "The healthy man does not torment others. Usually it is the tormented who become tormentors." The skill of reading character can itself turn into a form of psychological harm if misused. There are people who use Jung's insights as weapons, becoming what might be called shadow hunters. Individuals who exploit psychological knowledge to target others' vulnerabilities instead of understanding them. This is a distortion of Jung's intent. He warned that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Sometimes individuals obsess over analyzing others precisely to avoid confronting their own inner world. Signs you might be misusing character assessment include feeling superior when you think you've figured someone out. That sense of superiority suggests you are inflating your ego rather than cultivating understanding. Another warning sign is using your observations to manipulate others, which corrupts the purpose of this work. If you're exploiting someone's shadow tendencies or persona vulnerabilities to gain control over them, you've become what Jung might describe as psychologically toxic. You fall into judgment instead of curiosity. Authentic character assessment should expand your compassion, not sharpen your criticism. If you notice yourself drifting into constant judgment, it's usually a projection of your own shadow. You might be avoiding an honest look at your own patterns. When you spend all your time analyzing others but never apply the same level of scrutiny inward, you're using psychology as a shield against true self-awareness. Jung once cautioned, "The greatest danger is that one may get stuck in the unconscious and never come back to reality." Sometimes people become so fascinated with psychological interpretation that they lose touch with ordinary human connection. The remedy for this is what Jung called an ethical relationship with the unconscious. This means using psychological understanding to nurture love, growth, and empathy, not for manipulation, superiority, or power. Keep in mind, everyone you encounter is battling inner struggles you know nothing about. Jung noted, "In order to know the light, we must first experience the darkness." Most people's shadow projections and persona defenses are simply coping strategies for pain, fear, or unresolved trauma. Real character assessment should make you more humble, not more arrogant. When you see someone's psychological dynamics clearly, you're not just witnessing behavior, but their humanity, their struggles, and their defenses, efforts to survive a complicated world with limited tools. Jung recognized that all of us are wounded healers, each carrying layers of shadow material and cloaked in personas to protect our vulnerabilities. The purpose isn't to rip away others' masks, but rather to create the conditions for genuine connection. Insights into character should serve as bridges, not walls. They should lead you closer to compassion, not further into condemnation. Perhaps the most profound part of Jung's character assessment model is what might be called the mirror effect, that inevitable realization that the very individuals you're analyzing are reflecting aspects of your own psyche back to you. Jung captured this truth when he wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." The deeper purpose of evaluating another person's character is actually to awaken to your own. This mirror effect operates at several levels. First, the people who spark your most intense reactions are always showing you some piece of your shadow material. If arrogant individuals constantly irritate you, it's worth examining your own relationship with confidence, pride, and humility. If you feel drained by people who seem needy, you may need to explore your own unacknowledged needs and how you express them. Second, the traits you deeply admire in others often reveal your own unrealized potential. Jung called this positive projection, casting your own unlived possibilities onto others. When you place someone on a pedestal for being imaginative or courageous, you may actually be projecting qualities that you already contain but have not yet claimed. Third, the patterns you can see in others eventually become visible in yourself once you know how to recognize them. When you learn to spot persona breakdowns in those around you, you begin noticing your own. When you observe someone else's shadow projections, you become more able to catch your own in the moment. The mirror effect creates a feedback loop that fosters self-awareness. Every encounter becomes a kind of lesson. Each judgment becomes a doorway to greater self-discovery. Let me share an example from my own experience. I once worked with someone whose relentless hunger for validation annoyed me tremendously. I labeled them as insecure and attention-seeking, but applying Jung's framework made me look at why their behavior provoked such a sharp reaction. The uncomfortable realization was that I also had my own hidden relationship with validation that I hadn't admitted. I had crafted subtle strategies to seek approval and convince myself that they were somehow different from my colleagues' obvious methods. My harsh judgment of them was really self-rejection. I was condemning in them what I had not yet accepted in myself. Jung expressed it well when he said, "We are not what happened to us. We are what we wish to become." The mirror effect doesn't only reveal our wounds, it also shows us the qualities we can grow into. Every psychological trait you notice in others is present as potential within yourself. This doesn't mean that every person will develop every trait. Jung respected individuality and psychological type differences. What it does mean is that learning to recognize patterns in others provides you with a broader map of human potential, including your own unexplored terrain. This mirror effect can also explain why some people feel instantly familiar when you meet them. Jung described this as recognition of the archetypal, those universal human patterns that resonate with your own psychological makeup. As you practice Jung's framework for assessing character, you begin to embody what he called the conscious individual, one who sees with clarity rather than judgment, understands with depth rather than manipulation, and relates authentically without losing themselves in the process. Jung defined individuality as the opposite of being absorbed by a group identity, an institution, a race, or a nation. The conscious individual thinks independently, feels authentically, and relates genuinely instead of conforming blindly to collective patterns. This consciousness brings certain qualities into your relationships. You perceive others' shadow projections with compassion rather than superiority. You come to realize that their harsh judgments reveal their own struggles rather than fundamental moral failings. This recognition enables you to respond to the pain beneath their projections instead of reacting to the projections themselves. You can observe persona breakdowns without personalizing them. When someone lashes out defensively under pressure, you recognize it as a protective reflex rather than a reflection of their true self. This perspective prevents you from being pulled into unconscious conflict. A conscious individual can also hold paradox gracefully. Jung remarked, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong." You come to understand that people can embody contradictions. They can be both tender and harsh, resilient and fragile, authentic and guarded, all at once. You start using psychological insights to cultivate connection instead of separation. When you recognize the structure of someone's defenses, you feel empathy for their inner struggles rather than contempt. Most importantly, you begin extending this same compassionate lens to yourself. Jung wrote, "The first half of life is devoted to forming a healthy ego. The second half is going inward and letting go of it." With this perspective, you begin to see your own shadow projections and persona defenses not as flaws to condemn, but as sources of information. They teach you about your inner world. This conscious way of seeing transforms how you move through life. Conflicts shift into chances for deeper understanding. Difficult individuals become teachers. Your own emotional reactions become data points about your psychological terrain. Still, Jung cautioned that this consciousness carries a cost. Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. When you begin seeing patterns clearly, you may feel isolated from those still immersed in unconscious dynamics. This loneliness isn't permanent, but it is part of individuation. You're transitioning from the comfort of unconscious belonging to the vulnerability of conscious connection. The shallow bonds built on mutual projections, group personas, or shared judgments no longer fulfill you. Yet deeper, more genuine relationships gradually become possible. When you're able to recognize and accept both your own and others' psychological complexity, you open the door to relationships grounded in authenticity rather than illusion. Jung believed creativity arises from this place. The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. Conscious relationships feel lighter and more playful, creative rather than monotonous, alive rather than scripted. The ultimate aim of working with Jung's character assessment approach isn't to become an expert in dissecting human behavior. The true goal is to become more deeply human yourself. Jung put it succinctly, "Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious." As you train yourself to notice shadow projections and persona breakdowns in others, you naturally begin spotting them within yourself. This awareness opens up the power of choice. You can act with intention rather than reacting from old unconscious patterns. Integration unfolds gradually through small moments, catching yourself mid-projection, noticing your defenses rise, and choosing to respond authentically instead of defaulting to habitual reactions. Jung reflected, "We don't really heal anything, we simply let it go." By releasing unconscious habits, your authentic character is revealed. This isn't an easy process. Jung warned, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." To see your own psychological structures clearly requires facing uncomfortable truths you may have long avoided. But this is productive pain, the kind that brings growth instead of stagnation. The process of integration tends to move in stages. First, you become adept at noticing patterns in others while still remaining blind to your own. You can analyze everyone else's projections, but miss your own entirely. Next, you begin to recognize your own dynamics intellectually, but still get caught in them emotionally. You might tell yourself, "I know I'm projecting," even while feeling entirely justified in your judgment. With practice, you reach the third stage, the ability to catch yourself in real time and make a conscious choice to respond differently. This creates space between the initial trigger and your reaction, making room for conscious choice. Fourth, you begin responding to other people's unconscious patterns with awareness rather than with your own unconscious defenses. Instead of becoming defensive when someone projects their material onto you, you're able to see their underlying struggle and meet it with compassion and appropriate boundaries. Eventually, you embody what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold conflicting psychological forces in creative tension until something entirely new arises. You grow comfortable with paradox, ambiguity, and complexity. Jung once wrote, "The difference between a good life and a bad life is how well you walk through the fire." That fire is the unavoidable conflict, projection, and persona breakdowns woven into human connection. Learning to walk through such experiences consciously transforms them from destructive patterns into gateways for growth. This process doesn't unfold all at once, nor is it ever completely finished. Consciousness is not a final destination, but an ongoing practice. Each small moment of awareness, every time you decide to respond rather than react, every choice to see with clarity instead of judging with harshness, moves you closer to authentic selfhood. As you integrate Jung's insights about character and awareness, something striking begins to happen. Your presence itself begins creating ripples that impact the people around you. Jung described it this way: "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When you stop participating in unconscious games, when you refuse to feed someone else's projections or escalate in reaction to their collapsing persona, you create the conditions for new kinds of interactions. Others sense this shift even when they cannot explain it. They may comment that you seem calmer, different, or somehow more genuine. What they are actually noticing is your reduced reactivity to their unconscious material. You are no longer reinforcing their projections or enabling their defensive strategies. This is what could be called consciousness contagion. Your awareness naturally invites others into greater awareness, not by lecturing, not by explaining, but by living it. Jung wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." Your authentic presence speaks far louder than your words. Some people will resist this change. Your refusal to join in unconscious drama may frustrate those who are accustomed to relying on such dynamics. They might intensify their projections or strengthen their persona defenses in an attempt to drag you back into old familiar patterns. Yet others will be magnetized toward your awareness like plants leaning toward sunlight. They will sense the possibility of a more authentic way of connecting and gradually begin loosening their own defensive habits. This ripple effect does not stop at the level of one-on-one relationships. It spreads into families, organizations, and communities. When one person begins owning their shadow instead of hurling it outward, when one person starts responding consciously instead of reacting unconsciously, it grants permission for others to experiment with the same. Jung believed that the awakening of individual consciousness was essential to the transformation of humanity as a whole. He once said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you. When you know who you are, including your shadow and the authentic self beneath your persona, you become resistant to the world's projections. You also become a beacon for others searching for their own authenticity. Your willingness to face the shadow inside you gives others courage to face theirs. Your ability to drop your protective masks creates space for others to risk being authentic." This is the deeper purpose of character assessment, not to gain leverage or to manipulate, but to understand psychological dynamics so clearly that you can choose to respond consciously instead of being pulled into unconscious reaction. Jung's greatest gift was not just his theories, but his invitation to live with greater consciousness. Every time someone chooses awareness over unconsciousness, authenticity over performance, and compassion over judgment, they contribute to the evolution of human consciousness itself. The two factors Jung highlighted as revealing someone's true character their shadow projections, and their persona breakdowns are not simply methods for analyzing others. They act as mirrors reflecting your own path toward consciousness and authenticity. Jung observed, "To be normal is the ultimate aim of the unsuccessful. You are not here to be merely normal. You are here to be conscious, to see with clarity, to feel with depth, and to connect authentically with those around you." Each time you find yourself judging another harshly, you have an opportunity to look into your own shadow. Each time you observe someone's mask slipping under stress, you have a chance to reflect on your own persona defenses. Each time you resist the temptation to wield psychological insight as a weapon, you make the choice for awareness over unconsciousness. Jung grasped that the path toward authentic selfhood is the most vital work any person can pursue, not just for their own fulfillment, but for the collective development of consciousness. Your willingness to confront your shadow, to let go of your masks, and to respond consciously rather than reactively creates ripples far beyond your personal life. You become what Jung described as a culture creator, someone who demonstrates new possibilities for relationship, awareness, and being. The two revealing signs Jung identified are not the conclusion of character assessment. They mark the beginning of character development, your own growth, and your role in awakening those around you. So, keep your eyes open for projections. Notice when the masks slip and persona defenses falter. But most importantly, direct that same clarity toward yourself, because the character you are ultimately shaping is your own. Each conscious choice strengthens your authenticity. Each act of awareness builds resilience. Each time you meet others with compassion instead of condemnation, you create more space for genuine human connection. The journey into consciousness begins with paying attention, and it continues every day you choose to live awake rather than asleep.